We want to show the love of Christ. And if we aren't welcoming when people come in the door, then even if we do love those and we do desire to share God's love and the gospel with them, then we're certainly not creating a great first impression if we're not welcoming them with love. The Bible tells us multiple times in the New Testament to be hospitable. Not to throw too many weird phrases around, but it talks about greeting one another with actually 5 times. 4 times says with a holy kiss. Now, we're not telling you to go make out with the visitors that come in the door.
Please don't.
And welcome once again to another edition of Footnotes. It's a new year, and not to date the podcast, but it's a year that's uneven.
That's true.
So, should we tell them what year it is? Or should, when they're listening, like in 2052, they just guess?
Yeah. If you tell them, we'll lose all credibility because you can't date the podcast.
Can't date the podcast. So anyway, it's a new year. We're glad to be back. Everybody's around the table. We're excited to talk with you today, and we hope this podcast is encouraging to the church, blesses people, and helps you think more biblically and clearly. We're talking today about being a welcoming church. Now, guys, you know, we think we're a welcoming church. Let's say that on the front end. There's a lot of great things that we try to do and our members do. I've often heard people say, very friendly church. I've heard that now for years. I'm so encouraged by that. But there's always things we can do more, better. Not more better, but just more or better. Because I think more better is incorrect terminology.
It fits.
Brady, you're an English major, right?
Yes.
A, how did you get through that degree without falling asleep? And
Well,
B, is more better the more better way to say more better?
He's a German with an English degree. He knows.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think that's proper English.
Not correct, huh?
More better.
More better blues.
I think you just say make it better.
Okay, make it
But
better.
also more.
What if I said, it's very, very, very better? You know, they tell you in
Most
writing,
betterest.
don't put
Yeah.
things like very
Yeah.
in front of a word because
Yeah.
that's incorrect.
Superlatives.
It's superlative. It doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
Explain why it's better, right? Anyway, we believe that there's much better things that we can do. And so we want to do that on the podcast today, right, guys? So we're going to talk about being a welcoming church. Here's how we're going to frame the discussion. First of all, why do we think welcoming is an important subject to talk about for any church body? We're going to look at Scripture. We're going to talk about hospitality and encouragement and love and why we would want to focus on this. Secondly, we want to ask the question, are we a welcoming church currently, right now? There's some things that we know we're doing well, and then there's some things we know that we could improve. And then finally, okay, well, what can we improve? Now, we'll talk about all three of those. Let's start off, though, with the biblical mandate. A church that gathers, why should it be welcoming? What do you guys think? What's the answer?
Well, one reason is we want to show the love of Christ. And if we aren't welcoming when people come in the door, then even if we do love those and we do desire to share God's love and the gospel with them, then we're certainly not creating a great first impression if we're not welcoming them with love. The Bible tells us multiple times in the New Testament to be hospitable. Not to throw too many weird phrases around, but it talks about greeting one another with actually 5 times. 4 times says with a holy kiss. Now, we're not telling you to go make out with the visitors that come in the door.
Please don't.
or the kiss of love, as Peter would say in 1 Peter 4. No, but that was more of a cultural idea of greeting one another with love, and with that genuine desire to see someone feel like they belong.
Yeah, and the second greatest commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. So all of us at one point in time have gone to a church as a visitor before, never been to that place before. How would you want to be treated? You would want someone to greet you, welcome you, show you where the bathrooms are, make you feel at home, tell you the answers to the questions that you have. And so to love someone as ourself means that we should be thinking about those going through our doors. How are they experiencing our church, right? We want to consider them.
Yeah, and I think about Romans chapter 12 when Paul's talking about, living as a holy sacrifice. And then that whole chapter he's going on describing what does it look like for a Christian to live as a daily holy sacrifice that's pleasing to God, starting verse 9, he says, let love be without hypocrisy. And then more, he just describes what that looks like, ending that little paragraph there in verse 13 by saying, contributing to the needs of the saints and pursuing hospitality. Okay, so that's definitely true, 100% true with the church body, with members, showing one another care and hospitality, putting others' needs before your own. But we're also told, like you said, Brady, in that command, loving our neighbor. Okay, so what does love look like? What is this this love that's without hypocrisy? What does that look like? Well, it looks like showing hospitality. It looks like putting others' needs before your own, caring for one another. And a huge part of that, especially when we come together for our gathering, is just being friendly, being there, available to meet people's needs, showing, like Justin said, the love of Christ.
Yeah, I think of 1 John particularly, a very good epistle letter about love. And throughout that, he talks about how you should love the brethren. 1 John chapter 2, if you don't love the brethren, that's a sign you're not a believer. He's talking specifically about the church being loving among itself. 1 John 4, 7 and 8, he says, beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loves is born of God and knows God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. So in that chapter, there is a very clear expression about the church being loving toward one another, but also how that love is a display of the gospel to those who come into the gathering of the church. If you don't love each other, you can't love other people, and if you love one another, you're going to love your neighbor, right? And everything that you guys have so aptly said. Now, being welcoming as a church, that is what we would say is being loving. But let's make this distinction. I think we've established there are biblical precedents for why we should be loving. But in this modern age of churches, the seeker-sensitive movement, and that is a terminology that was applied in the late 90s, early 2000s, with certain churches that were all about just pleasing the seeker who is lost, who comes to your church. And I would say, as a matter of distinction, that's not the kind of hospitality we want to foster at Broadway. Now, it's not that we don't love people who are coming in the doors of our church that are lost. Of course we do. And I think we've established we want to make sure that whatever we present, right, we present it well. So it would be like this analogy. We have this glorious, beautiful steak of the gospel. So think of a fantastic steak. Jackson, what's your favorite steak restaurant in Memphis?
Oh, I don't know.
I thought you said you like Ruth Chris.
Oh, I do like Ruth Chris.
Yes,
Yeah, that's
okay.
a good one.
So
Too
Ruth
expensive.
Chris.
Too expensive.
Of course. Ruth Chris. I was so unimpressed by Folks Folly. So unimpressed.
I
Anyway,
haven't been there.
you're not missing. Save your money. Anyway, Ruth Chris, very good. Okay, let's say we have a Ruth Chris steak. They bring it out of that boiler oven. They put those chives or whatever that green stuff is on the top with the butter. But you put it on a trash can, not on a plate. Now, you have this glorious steak, but you are presenting it on a trash can, top, lid, right? Take the lid off the trash. Would you want to serve that at a fine restaurant? Of course not, unless it's like a weird, we do this to get laughs kind of restaurant. You wouldn't want to serve
For
that.
the sake of the analogy.
Yeah, for
no.
the sake of the analogy, no. And if I took a trash can top that had been used for trash and I put this glorious steak on it and said, "Here, free steak, Jackson," would you eat it?
might wanna ask
Ethical
someone else.
dilemmas. Brady, we know you'd eat it. Brady, we know you'd eat it. Brady'd be like, "Free lunch. I didn't sign up for it, but I got it."
We may eat it, but we wouldn't feel necessarily great about
Oh,
it.
right.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so for the sake of the analogy, that is the way I believe we are when we're unloving to one another as believers and when we are unloving to the people that come in our church. We have the glorious meat of the gospel, right? The pure meat of the word. We are presenting that meat, but we don't want to do that by putting it on a trash can lid. And the trash can lid would be just things we overlook that we say, well, what's the big deal? Who cares what you put it on? Well, it matters, right? We want to put it on a plate. Now, the seeker-sensitive movement, let's go back to that. They were big about, we're going to do everything to make the lost person happy. I think that's a fair statement. We're going to do everything to appease the lost person. So we want the lost person to enjoy themselves and like themselves and think we're cool, and on it went. The fallacy, though, of that movement, and that was touted by Bill Hybels' Willow Creek Church in Chicago, by Rick Warren, Saddleback Church, and his book, Purpose Driven Church. It was a huge thing in church growth movement. What were their names? I'm trying to go back. I can see the book. It's green. I'll think of it in a minute. Leland Ryken and what's their names? You don't know. You don't remember. I'll think
Would
of
not
it in
have
a
read
minute.
that book.
Anyway, the seeker-sensitive movement, these guys back at Fuller Theological Seminary back in the 70s kind of came up with these terms. Let's try to make church appealing to get lost people to come in. And then that became famous by like Hybels and Warren and people like that. Okay, so all that said, this was a movement that was really, really popular in the church in the 90s and the early 2000s. The problem with that movement is it's really not biblical. Lost people need to be under conviction, don't you think? I mean, we want them to come to church, but we can't make them completely comfortable because they're lost.
Yeah.
So the gospel is going to be convicting. The word of God is not always going to be wonderful. And, you know, again, we want to have the plate right, but we can't do everything to assuage their conscience.
Yeah. And the church is not for lost people. The lost people are absolutely welcome in the church. We want them to come and to hear the preaching of the word and see what we do here, what's different about us. But when the Bible talks about outsiders and how we're supposed to act toward outsiders, how we're supposed to present the gospel to outsiders, well, the only thing outside of, or the main thing outside of our preaching of the gospel is living it out. And back to what you said, Brady, how we love. Like that, obeying that second greatest commandment is our job in being seeker sensitive. That's how we're supposed to be sensitive towards seekers, is love.
Well said. The church gathered is ultimately not primarily for the lost.
Yeah.
It's for the believer to come to be edified. Hebrews 10, 24, 25. We gather together so that the believer goes out to share the gospel. And they become missionaries to share the gospel. That's exactly right. Yeah. I thought of his name, Donald McGavern.
Oh, of
Donald
course.
McGavern. You know who that is?
No, I didn't.
Now I'm going to order the book.
Donald McGavern.
Yeah, but what, and obviously the seeker-sensitive movement didn't have it right, but what they did have right is we should remove obstacles that are just natural obstacles to people hearing the gospel. But if the gospel itself offends or is an obstacle to their becoming part of the church and being saved by Jesus Christ, so be it. That's not up to us to change. You know, what did Paul say in 1 Corinthians? That he's become all things to all people so that he might save some through the gospel. And so we do that to the extent that we can, but we cannot water down the gospel. We can't play, contemporary popular secular music for the sake of giving them something they're going to hear or enjoy or relate to. Yeah. We keep the gospel the gospel.
And what does Paul say about doing that? When you start, if that's the way that you're attracting people, if anybody's preaching a different gospel, altering this gospel, watering it down, let them be accursed. It's serious business.
And as many people have said, what you draw them with is what you keep them with. Yeah. So then we're going to have to keep on doing Six Flags over Jesus and entertaining them with bigger and better shows and different music, and you're never going to keep them with actually the gospel if that's what you didn't get them with.
Yeah, and no matter how friendly you are, I mean, I think this is what we're kind of saying in a nutshell. We want to be friendly. It's our goal to present the steak on a nice plate. But no matter how well you present it, at the end of the day, the gospel still offends. It just does. I remember a guy, he would bring his father to our church in Texas, and his name was Trent, and he would bring his lost father. And he said, my dad really squeams when he comes to the service. He doesn't like your preaching. And I said, well, what does he not like? And he said, well, he just feels like you're reading his mail. And I said, well, of course I'm not, right? I don't even know your father. And I said, that is called conviction. See, he's under the word. So no matter how attractive we made the music, no matter how nice we made the building, there would still be this measure of conviction. Now, We know that. We still want to present the plate the best we can. So with that theological grounding that keeps us from going off into the seeker-sensitive, crazy movement, we just want to do everything we can to make lost people feel so happy here. I mean, that's a little too far for us. So we say, okay, are we welcoming as a church? So now we want to look introspectively at Broadway, and we want to say, are we welcoming as a church? So Thom Rainer, or Thom Rainer.
Or Thomas Rainer.
Yeah, but see, it says Thom, Thom.
But if you put his
Thom
middle
Rainer.
initial in there, it's Thomas Rainer.
Thom Rainer wrote a book that we recently gave out to all of our greeters and security people. And the book is called Becoming a Welcoming Church. We have extra copies in the office. If you're interested, listener, you can grab a copy if they're still available. Now, this is a sweet little book. It's not deep. It's kind of milquetoast. That's okay. But it's got good things to say. Thom has done his research, right? With his,
I hope he's listening to this.
He calls himself Thom on the Church Leaders podcast. He jokes about it himself. He doesn't know us. He doesn't care. He's like, I'm too rich for you people. He doesn't care about us.
He's too friendly for us.
Yeah. Well, anyway, they've done some good research, and in this book, Becoming a Welcoming Church, there's just some good common sense things. Now, what I like about books like this is I don't feel crazy. Books have the power to say what you think normally, but you're just glad when somebody else says it. Have you ever felt that power? Like, you've been saying these things. This is nothing new. But somebody else puts it in print, and you go, see, I'm not crazy. I'm not outrageous. I'm not difficult. It's in writing. Somebody else agrees. You ever feel that way?
Yeah, well, and I think when we see it in writing by someone else, we realize that this is a problem that is more widespread than my own situation. It's not just my opinion or preference. This is really an issue that is affecting multiple churches, nationwide, throughout the world, that we need to figure out in this case, what it means to be welcoming.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So he talks in this book about the fact that every church thinks they're welcoming. Every church says, well, we're the friendliest church in the world. And then he goes on to kind of say, are you? Let's identify some key markers. So they interview like a host of church visitors. They do some research. They have some questionnaires. All these visitors at all these churches fill out the questionnaire. This is their data. So he says, okay, let's talk about things that churches typically do wrong. So he lists in this book about 10 things. Everything from the stand and greet time that's awkward. So I got to tell you this story. Your son, Hudson, Justin, he comes up to me yesterday, and he says, Pastor Mark, he's so well articulated. And he says, Pastor Mark, he says, I'm curious about one thing in the book that you gave our greeters, because Hudson is a greeter. And I said, yes, Hudson? And he said, well, in the book, it talks about just how awkward the stand and greet time is. And I'm wondering why we continue to do that when the book says it's a bad idea. Don't you love that? And I said, well, Hudson,
why have we not immediately implemented everything?
I said, that is a very good observation. I said, why do you think we do it sometimes? I said, we don't do it every time, but why do you think we do it? He said, well, I'm not sure. I mean, the book says it's not a good idea. And he is really thinking about this, and that's kudos to him. So
it's 24 hours a day with that kid.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. He is Sheldon, which I don't watch that show, but I've seen clips, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's Hudson on a TV show. But anyway, I told him, I said, well, sometimes we do it just to break the ice because the atmosphere is kind of cold and we just feel kind of, I don't know, today everybody's not awake. So we do this thing where we say, okay, shake one another's hand. And he was like, okay, well, that makes sense. And so anyway, but Rainer says people hate that. Do you agree with that?
I've seen it done really weird ways, where, hey, go, everyone give someone a hug around you. Turn to them and say, God loves you and so do I.
And that's why we have the flu.
And if you're a visitor at a church like that, and, especially maybe you're more introverted, that would be really terrifying and uncomfortable. I think having a time, I don't know, where you're giving people the opportunity to greet one another. Now, it can be awkward maybe at times when we single out, go find a visitor and welcome them or go shake their hand. Then maybe they feel rushed or bombarded. I don't know. I think there are some pros and cons.
Or for a visitor, they could be overlooked during that time if members use that time to just talk to one another and catch up when they could be doing that at another time. It just makes a visitor feel awkward. Like, what do I do at this time? I'm just standing around looking at people.
And you have to be careful because it can't go long.
Yeah.
Because then you're just standing there.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's why we try to keep it short for their sakes.
He talks about other things like unsafe, unclean children's areas. I could understand why that would be a concern. No place to get information at the church, a bad church website, poor signage. This is a big one for me. Insider church language. Yeah. There was a book by Lyle Schaller in the 80s called The Small Church is Different. And in that book, he talked about how small churches are small because of the way they think. And they do everything. They do it in a small way. They're small-minded. And it was super interesting to me. This is an old book. I used to use it when I taught a seminary class, and I used the book as an example. But what he says basically in the book is that, when you go to these small churches, they have this insider lingo that nobody else understands. They don't recognize that, but what it does is it ensures that the cell, so think of a body cell. The cell stays small. The cell never multiplies. So, instead of saying, if you would like more information on the youth group, contact youth at Broadway, you say, go see Brooke. And people go, who is Brooke?
Right. Sign up on the bulletin board. The what? Where?
Where is that? You know? And
or
so
go to the airplane room.
That's our thing. Go to the airplane room. What is that? Or see Bob, and it's like, who is Bob? If I'm a visitor, I don't understand your lingo.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who your people are. I don't know where would Bob be? Where would I go see him? How do I find him? And so because of that, Schaller said many moons ago that these small churches were small because they thought small, they talked small, they unconsciously excluded people. So they would make decisions as a church like, okay, we're not going to have service tonight, Sunday night, and they would just tell everybody. But then they wouldn't put any signage on their door. So if a visitor showed up, because it was posted, publicly, we have a 10 a.m. worship service and a 6 p.m. on Sunday night, and the visitor shows up and everything's dark and there's no sign on the door saying we dismiss tonight. That communicates you're not in the in crowd. We haven't thought about you, and we don't really want you in the in crowd. So I thought that was so fascinating when I read that book. So I've always said to you guys, right? I mean, I've preached this. Don't put names in the bulletin. Don't say, go see this person. Let's have info at Broadway Church. Make it accessible to everybody so that nobody feels left out. Because there is a very real thing. When you come to a church, you feel like, I guess I'm not in the inner circle. I guess I'm not in the popular group. Yeah. And then you feel unloved. So language
we're not altering the way that we do things to, cater and be seeker sensitive. We're just trying to care about people. Trying to love the stranger.
Yeah.
And it's hard to think about things from that perspective. When you've been in a church for a really long time, you forget to see it from that outsider's perspective of when I say, the CYA ministry is going bowling tonight.
What is the CYA?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you start using acronyms and Sunday school names that no one knows. It's hard to put yourself in that position of, if I walk into another church today, will they use this kind of language that I will understand, or is it going to immediately ostracize me?
Yeah, so, these are, again, things Rainer is mentioning in his book. Another thing, members telling guests they're in the wrong pew.
Gosh.
Man. Now, that happened here when we lost power in the sanctuary, remember?
The 2 weeks that we met
in June of 2023.
the Performing Arts Center, yeah.
and we moved over to the pack, the old this is where we all used to worship kind of thing. I had 2 new members come up to me at separate times and say, hey, you might want to say something because people are saying, hey, this is our pew. And like
In the pack?
Well, I kind of think for old Broadway members, to be fair, that whole thing became nostalgia lane,
Oh, yeah.
and they just couldn't look past that. And they didn't hear much of what I was saying about Jonah. They were like, it's just so wonderful. I'm just thinking about when I was a kid and my kids were kids, and, we baptized everybody, and I mean, that's great. I'm thankful for that, but I'm like, now listen to the word. We're here for the word. I know this is nostalgic, but, you gotta pay attention. And so with that came some of that, well, you can't sit here. This is where we sat. And that happened to 2 different people. And I just had to apologize, and I had to say, I'm sorry. It's normally not who we are. It's not what we're like. So we definitely had that going on just those 2 weeks. I haven't heard that anymore. We have so many pews in the big place. You can throw a bowling ball. You probably won't hit anybody. So you can find you a seat,
Gosh, that's so horrifying that people have the gumption to do that.
But that happened. Yeah. Poor signage is one of the things he mentioned. One of the things we struggle with, our members probably don't realize this, is our front doors, where the columns are, the very big White House-looking front doors. Just this past Sunday, a visiting couple went to those front doors trying to get in the church and did not understand until they figured out, okay, there's no way in this church. I mean, I don't know why they went to the doors.
I mean, I was thinking about that when that happened, and it's like, why would you ever go there? You got to walk around like this through the grass and all that. But there are 2 sidewalks going, like, the sidewalk that goes around the front of the church, and there are sidewalks going right up to those doors. So,
well, and that's what I said when I first came. I grew up here, and I was used to the whole campus. I taught at SBC. I mean, it just all made sense to me. But I had a friend. Phil, remember I told you Justin Philip Atterbury came to visit from the seminary, and he's from Texas, and he said, man, I took him out to dinner, he and his wife, Stephanie, and he said, honestly, I would not have known to not go through that front door, but you told me beforehand, don't go through the front door. Go around to the side. Well, when he said that to me, I thought, okay, here's a pastor and a seminary professor who was about to make that mistake, but I prevented him from doing it. Well, how many other people do that? And this past Sunday is the example. So we're putting signage out, but people just naturally think, well, that's the front door, right? So if I don't know where to go, I go there. That's why we made the move a couple of years ago. We put that big lettering on the awnings that said north entrance, south entrance, preschool entrance. I said, we've got to identify to people, this is where you come in. They don't know. Think about if you pull on the campus, just the normal parking lot, south parking lot. The school has a big sign and a big entrance, and it says main entrance. Well, that's locked every Sunday. So if you pull up on a Sunday morning and you think, well, that's the main entrance. Nope, that's locked, and you're like a mile away from the sanctuary. Well, then if you go around to the front door, nope.
That's
That's
Timothy's
locked.
parking garage.
That's Timothy's parking garage. And then if you go, so how do I get in this place? So we said we've got to update these things. We've got to be proactive. It's really hard to see that, So all this said, he lists all these things that are bad. One more thing, dirty facilities. He says, quote, pews had more stains than a Tide commercial. No comment.
We shouldn't talk about that. I don't think.
But he says a dirty church communicates to the guest, we really don't care. Now, that's why we've made efforts, once we're debt-free, to clean up, right? So we're in a remodel campaign right now, phase 2. We want to get to phase 3. Why? Because we want to communicate we do care, and we're thankful for what God has given us. It's not about the building, but this is the plate, and we want to honor the Lord, and so this matters. We don't want to look like we had 80 kids in here, 80 little kids in here doing all kinds of stuff all over the carpet.
Drinking their juice boxes. And
And it does kind of look like that right now. But anyway, thank you, Jesus. All right, here's some positive things that Rayner mentions. Positive things are someone asked the guest to sit with them. Now that our people do that a lot. Let me point it out. Let me call it out. Let me praise the Lord Jesus. On our neighborhood page, the Witten Place neighborhood, somebody posted, I'm looking for a church to go to. I've got a homeschool kid. They need friends. Something like that. I don't remember. And I'm always hesitant to answer this kind of stuff because that's bait and click for a pastor. You know, they're going to tell you how they hate you and they hate your church, hate your school. And I'm like, I ain't answering that. But we had 2 members that did answer in that Facebook page, and they were so wonderful. They said, we would love to have you at Broadway Baptist Church. The pastor even lives in this neighborhood. And I'm like, Nick, no, shh. But anyway, they're like, we would love to have you. And this member, whom I shall not reveal, but it is your mother-in-law, Jackson. This member said, I would even love for you to sit with us. Let me know if you're coming, and I will meet you at the front door, and I will sit with you.
Not at the front door.
Well, one of the many
door.
side doors.
Secret
I will meet
compartment.
you at the secret compartment, and I will sit with you. Yes. And so I was so thankful that the person said that. And the person, Justin, said, our youth minister homeschools his kids, and he would love to talk with your person. And so anyway,
Yes.
they said it better than that. But this is my memory of what they said.
Yeah.
And so 2 of our members responded and were like, I will be happy to sit with you. I'll be happy to meet you at the door. And I just thought, look at that. Look at our great people that are just reaching out and want to help. And so that's super encouraging. People introduce themselves to the guest. I hear this all the time. Now, I had one guy tell me this past Sunday. We've had a lot of guests.
We have.
I've had one guy tell me this past Sunday. He said, well, the week before I came in on the left side. That's the south side. And he said, only one person shook my hand. He said, but on the right side, I've had 50 people come up and shake my hand. And I said, well, the left side, that's the snobby people. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't know what to say. And he told Ken Taylor that too.
Oh, wow.
So Ken said, well, he said the same thing to me. So I'm glad somebody else heard that. But it's a good reminder. Make sure you greet people, shake their hand, whatever side of the church you're on. And people do that. Clear signage, we're working on that. Clearly marked welcome center. Kids love the children area. Everything was sanitary.
The sanatorium.
Insane. Everything was insane. Parking was visible. You know, blah,
We're working on parking.
Yeah, we're working on all that. So we had a greeter meeting at the beginning of the year that we will not name. That is a odd number year that starts with 20. But anyway, we had a... I'm not dating the party. I'm not going to do it.
That's right.
I'm not going to do
That
it.
narrows it down to 90, well, I guess 49 years.
49.
You're right?
How old are you, Jackson? 25?
Not even close.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway,
Timothy's close to
so
that.
it's an odd number year, and we had this greeter usher security meeting, and we told them we're making a lot of changes. We want to help you. We want to serve you. So we've moved our welcome centers. So if you're a member, you're going to see them move to the north and the south entrance. We have gifts to give, to guests, but we want their information. We have clearer signage. We have new cards on our ministry where you can get involved. We have a great beginning at Broadway class for new members, and we're promoting that more. We're trying to do so many things to help our members, right? So yeah, are we a welcoming church is the question. Well, I mean, there's certain things we don't do well that we could improve. There's certain things that we are doing well that we could improve. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Well,
How would you answer, are we a welcoming church?
I'll speak as one who came as a visitor 5 years ago, not knowing one person at the church.
Were you a lizard?
Yes.
They
What is a
arrived in 50 motherships.
Sure.
You don't. I guess you guys are
The
way
lizard
too.
people.
I guess you guys are too old for
Oh,
that.
dear.
Maybe.
There was a TV show on NBC.
Too old for that?
Yeah,
Too
in
young,
1983 and 1984 and 85.
Was this V?
Yes, V.
Okay, I never saw the original, but I saw the remake.
I have it on DVD if
Okay.
you want to see it.
All right.
Yeah. They arrived in 50 motherships, offering their friendship and technology to Earth. and they turned out to be lizards.
Yeah,
and they were here to
the
eat
bad
us
guys. Yes.
and take our water.
Well, yeah. Well, I will.
Sounds
I
like
can neither
political parties. Anyway,
confirm nor
okay.
deny whether I'm part of that reptilian race. But
But when you arrived,
when I arrived,
Oh,
whatever
you just
that
dated the
means-
podcast. You
Oh,
said
did
5
I?
years ago.
Well, that's just
Good
5
job.
years from somewhere. Who knows? We don't have to ever tell anyone what that date was. But when we came in, one thing that we noticed is the church is very loving. And I think we can make a few distinctions maybe between loving and welcoming. Once we made it into the church, and I think at that time there was already some pretty good signage. We did not go to the false front doors. We were able to find the sanctuary. We were able to come in. One of the first people we met, Joshua Roberts, came and introduced himself to us, and we were able to meet some other people as well. And so I think all the things you want are there. We just want that to happen as soon as people arrive on campus. So I would say that we are a very loving church. We're just trying to extend that love to the parking lot and to the
Yes.
doors as soon as people come in, because if you're confused about where you are or you don't feel like you belong within the first 30 seconds to 5 minutes, then it's going to make it very uncomfortable the rest of the time. It's going to make it very uncomfortable when you're trying to worship and listen to the gospel.
No matter how loving people are on
Exactly.
the inside.
Exactly. So we want to take that love and share it in the parking lot,
Yeah.
and the doors everywhere.
I think one thing we're trying to work on is a better map, because we have a very large facility and lots of hallways and corridors, and like especially the church offices, people are like, this is like a rat maze back here. There's different ways to go, and so I think just helping, we know our way around. Obviously, if you've been here a while, okay, that's Fellowship Hall, that's the hub. But even that, the hub, what's the hub, right? If you're a visitor, like I don't know what a hub is, I don't know where the Fellowship Hall is, I don't even know where the church offices are. And so just trying to be more proactive in helping people, hey, here's an updated map, here's where this is, here's where these classes are. And of course we're remodeling, so that's all going to have to be continuously updated as we change our spaces. But I think that's one way we're trying to improve, because, if you've been here for 30 years, you know the church like the back of your hand. But if you're walking into the Death Star, right, big building, you're like, I don't know where I'm supposed to go.
Yeah.
That's right.
And another thing that, just talking about taking that love even out to the parking lot, one thing that we've talked about before that we're trying to be better about is making sure that we as members are leaving space for guests to get closer to the church. We want to leave those closer parking spaces, especially, over on the south side, like when you have all of that huge North Point parking lot that, sometimes visitors end up way out there and they don't know they've got to run a marathon to get to the building. But leaving those front spaces for guests is just such a small but impactful way that we can show love to the stranger that's coming. You have an option when you pull into the parking lot every Sunday. Am I going to make a decision that's best for me, that's most comfortable for me, or am I going to choose just show love and think about others, put others' needs before my own, especially the stranger that may or may not be coming today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a great point. Our greeters told me, they said one of the biggest problems we're having, our church members are parking in the guest spots. What do we do? And I said, well, let them come in, then slit their
Start
tires.
popping some tires.
Set their cars on
And
fire.
then write a note, you will learn.
Now they're stuck in the guest parking
Oh,
spot.
well, that's true.
Well, get a forklift
Okay,
and
hold
move
on.
it.
Let me text.
Call
Let
the
me
tow
text.
truck.
Don't do that. Don't do that. That was a bad idea.
Abort mission.
Abort. There's a trap. Okay, so we have also purchased golf carts. We have golf carts going around because we do have a really big parking lot, really big 2 parking lots. And so we've thought about that. We're like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to offer rides to people. So if you're older and you can't make it to the front door, we've got people out there on golf carts. Take advantage of that. Trying to do everything we can to try to, again, make it accessible.
Still love our members, but make sure that we are showing love to the outsider that's coming
Yeah.
in.
Right, we don't want the visitor to die of dysentery before
Yeah.
they get
Exactly.
from the
Yeah.
tennis courts to
Yeah.
the
You have begun the
entrance.
Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it kind of leads us into the third thing. So we've talked about, why should we be hospitable? And we've hopefully established a biblical precedence. And then are we welcoming? There's things we could improve, things we need to work on. Let's talk about, what we are improving. Let's end on that. So what are we doing? And in this new year, what can our members expect? And I think we've kind of covered a lot of this.
we've
the
covered
golf
a lot.
course. So we'll
Yeah.
skip. For the last point, let's just talk about whatever we want.
Let's sing a
What
song.
do you guys think?
Can we sing a closing song? A
We
hymn,
can.
maybe.
Well, here's one thing that I'll mention, and I think our members could just always have a humble spirit. You know, I remember coming into the church, joining the church, and trying to be loving and welcoming to people. And that means you have to get out of your comfort zone, introduce yourself to people, maybe ask some questions. You know, is this your first time? Have you been here for a while? And I can remember one woman, I won't say who it was, but she said, I've been a member here for 27 years, and just kind of cut me down as I tried to introduce myself. If we want people to be outward focused greeters and welcoming, that means that sometimes someone is going to welcome you, member, when you've been here every single week since you were in your mother's womb. And that's okay. All that means is we're going to get to know one another even better as a body. And if someone mistakes you for a visitor, it doesn't mean that they hate you. It doesn't mean that you're not an important part of the church. So be humble about that, and don't be a jerk to those that are trying to greet.
And look at it as loving.
Yeah.
Somebody loved me enough, so I'm going to be kind back. A fruit of the Spirit is kindness, which escapes some people. And so, yes, they cared enough to ask you if you were new. Well, I've been a member for 27 years. Well, do you come a lot? I mean, that's what I want to say.
Do you serve?
People
Like,
say,
how
you
would they
don't
know
know
you?
me. And I'm like, not if you show up for 1 hour a week and you sit on the back pew. No, I don't know you. I barely can remember my 4 kids' names. Do you think that I can remember all these people's names? I call you, Micah, Landon, Lacey, come here now.
You've gone to the kids, the dogs. Yes,
Yes,
amen.
Bella. Yeah. Savannah did this deal with me. I think it was this summer. She said, Dad, you keep calling me Lacey. She said, so here's what we're going to do. You mess up and you call me Lacey 3 times. You owe me, something like a Coke or whatever. So I said, okay, you're on, because I don't ever forget you, Bella. That's our dog's name. I'm like, I don't ever forget you, Bella. So you're on. So yes, we're going to forget people. It's called being human.
Yeah.
I'm only human. Y'all remember that song?
We don't.
Flesh and blood. You remember that, Timothy? You're shaking your head.
No.
Wow, y'all need to listen to more 80s on Spotify.
I guess so.
So we're human beings. We make mistakes. We don't know everybody. One of our greeters asked me this question. Well, Pastor, what can I do to not offend people if they have been members, but I don't know if they are because I'm new? And I said, well, here's a little trick, okay? A couple of tricks. Giving my tricks away. You ready? I said, first of all, don't ask them if they're new. Don't even go there. Just say when they walk in, go up to them and say, hi, is there any way I can help you? And just ask. And that way, if they've been there a million years or if they're brand new, you offered to help.
Mm-hmm.
And if they look at you funny, just say, okay, I will help you get a new attitude. But is there any way I can help you? And I said, that way you're not asking them if they're new. You're not asking them if they're a visitor. You're just saying, yeah. Another little trick pastors always use. If we call you brother or sister, we don't remember your first name. Hey, brother.
You gave away the secret.
I know. Hey, brother, good to see you.
That's right.
Wait, you call me brother if you do.
Yeah. That's right, John. John Smith. John and Jackie Smith.
Yeah.
And Billy.
You could ask-
Billy Hansen.
You could ask, how long have you been at Broadway? And if they're like, it's been 35 years, or they say, actually, this is my first time. Right? You could answer that question either
could.
way.
You
How long
could.
have you been at Broadway? This is my first Sunday. Okay.
Another thing I told our greeters, and this is under, okay, what are we trying to do? I said, look, always do the Sam Walton. What is the Sam Walton? Well, Sam Walton used to tell his people in Walmart, he would say, if a customer comes up to you and they say, where is the shoe department, never point and never say, over there. You take them to it. So I said, if somebody comes up to you and they're like, hi, good morning, where's your nursery? Let me show you. I would be happy to go back there with you. Or, hey, where's your sanctuary? Let me take you in there and help you sit down. And when you do that, you're kind of doing the Sam Walton. You're taking them, you're not pointing, which incidentally, probably every Walmart employee would be fired today.
Right. Yeah, that's a great antidote for bad maps, right?
Yes.
As if you're actually personally leading someone.
Especially
to a
if
place.
someone's wanting to go to the beginning at Broadway class and they're trying to find the conference room in the church office. I mean, you can't point. And
They may
show people
starve
where
before
that-
they find
they,
it.
may,
It's over
they
there.
may die in a hallway in North Point somewhere before they find the conference room.
On
I mean,
Monday, the school comes
yeah.
in. I don't know. There's some dead person in there.
he's saying something about the beginning of Broadway class. I don't know. So yes, walk them to the church office.
No, it's like those people on those expeditions, like in the forest, and they get lost and they write notes. They die. They find their bones, but there's like a letter written. You know, was trying to get to beginning at Broadway,
Yes.
got lost,
carved into the
Yeah.
dry erase board.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe they'll find that.
Walk them to the conference room in the church office.
Yeah.
Well, all of this hopefully would encourage our members to be more welcoming and hospitable and loving. And, you know, again, so many people do a great job of this, but we could always do anything we do better. And we do it for the glory of God, right? We do it for the gospel.
Yeah.
Because we know that we have this wonderful steak and we're presenting it to people. And, you know, if they get offended by the meat, if they say, well, I'm a PETA person, well, that's your conviction. That's what you got to deal with. But we don't want the offense to be us.
Yeah.
That's right.
We want to remove any of the barriers. So we have the page numbers of the Bibles. We put the sermon notes in the back. We try to think of people. We try to be loving in what we do in every possible way. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Yep.
Let's
Yeah.
do it.
Amen.
Keep doing it.
Keep doing it. Amen. On that note, we will say that's the end of Footnotes.